All right. You may have just seen pop up in chat the agenda. And since it is now 6:09, we're just going to get this game underway. So, Richard, I'm officially calling this meeting to order.
You're in order.
Officer reports. Well, let's see. Superintendent, me. And I don't actually have anything to report outside of the election results, which is later on the agenda. Okay, the division is still here. And that's quite honestly just about it. Treasurer is not here. We do have an AP chair.
Hey. Well, the report's not going to be much longer than the superintendent's, but Michael Huntsberger got a Golden Spike Award, which was our first remote evaluation. So we got that. Richard got his volunteer AP this last year, and Max Magliario, he got cars. I believe it was either the end of 19 or the first part of last year. So I don't know whether we ever talked about that one, but Max has almost got his MMR. He's down to just the 3 hand laid track components. He's got 1 finished and evaluated, and he's got 2 of them already, the last 2 ready to go for the evaluation. And as soon as we can set up a Zoom meeting and do that, he'll have his civil AP, which will be his 7th, and then he will be filling out, or Jack will be filling out his MMR paperwork, and we'll have another MMR in the division. And if I missed anybody, that's all I recall, but memory is fading. So if I miss somebody, I apologize. But I think that was it. I think there's a lot of people working on stuff, but I haven't seen anything officially come through yet.
Ross, can you send me that, your notes on that, so I don't misspell people's names?
Sure.
Thank you.
Especially Richard. You want me to get that one?
KIR.
There you go.
Okay, membership. Larry.
Well, I do have a very short but not very sweet report. Since I became the chair during 2020, there's not been much activity. Our membership has decreased, unfortunately, from 135 members on the roster to 120 members now. One I noticed in going through the roster was Whistle Stop.
Corporate
Something
membership.
happened to my screen.
I got a piece of flour. Look. Did Violet eat her cake already?
Yeah.
Okay, go take a shower.
Flour.
Somebody mute Greg.
Go take a shower.
Am I still there?
You're still here.
on.
I just
Okay.
muted Craig.
We acquired one new member, and I'm going to butcher his name. I'm sorry. It's Javier Quiroga, Quiroga. I know I butchered that last name. We had 4 members who passed away: Lauren Martell in Beaverton, John Hudson in Portland, Bob Emmert in Tigard, and Stan Schmidt in Dallas. And I will say, I'm hoping the COVID restrictions will be lifted so we can get a little more active.
Which would help.
That's my report.
Waiting for Richard to look up like he's ready for something else.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I can type well behind you.
You're better than I am at that then. Okay.
And I got great legs too.
New business. I don't believe we have any short of the election, which is not really new business. It's business. So, Greg, I'm going to unmute you, so I hope that's okay. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Can you turn your...
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can we see you?
Oh, yeah. Hold on here 1 second. Can you see me now?
We can.
Just finishing
Okay.
up dinner. So
So the election results, let's see if I can do this from memory. By a vote of 24 to, I believe it was 7. Congratulations, Greg. You are the new assistant superintendent whenever that date in the policy manual shall come about.
thank you very much.
The end of this meeting.
Excited. End of this meeting. All right.
Speaking of policy menus, right? Manuals. The secretary over there asked me to mention to everybody that Second Division does have a policy manual, a very nice one, actually. And it can be downloaded from our website at 2dpnr.org, which is, of all things, a Raspberry Pi 4 sitting over in my library. Some of you might know what that is. Last year, I pretty much didn't. All right, so announcements and previous notice. I don't know that we have any announcements, and we have no events coming up that we need previous notice on. So I will now adjourn this portion of our annual meeting. Congratulations, Mr. Assistant Superintendent. And James, I believe I have made you a co-host. The floor is yours. Except that you're muted.
I am muted. Okay. Alrighty, 1 second. All right, hi y'all. My name is James Knabb. I'm from Frisco, Texas, a little bit north of Dallas. I'm going to talk about the next generation model railroading today. So what we're going to talk about Gen Z more specifically, meaning the next generation. We're going to focus on people in the age range right now between 14 and 25. So sort of that student age, right when you're at the beginning of high school, and then sort of 25, right when you're entering the workforce. That's who we're going to be talking about today. So what are we going to expect with this generation? The first thing is that this generation is not really big into model building. They're not really model builders. Right now, currently, this generation is more into rail fanning and have smaller layouts, meaning that rail fanning is the first priority, and then model railroading is sort of the second. And another thing that's interesting is that this generation has instant gratification. I know a lot of us have instant gratification, but what I mean by instant gratification is two things. The first thing is that this generation likes things instantaneous, because they grew up with iPhones, and iPhones, you can find things instantaneously. You can find information within seconds. And so this generation has some sort of shorter attention span compared to older ones. And another thing is that this generation likes things more efficient because they're student age. And the two things that students don't have is time and money. And so they're looking for things that are a little bit more efficient compared to older individuals. And then the last thing that's something to expect is social media usage. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But one thing I want to point out is that all photos are actually sent to me by model railroaders that are around my age or in that target range that I was talking about. And so I didn't get these off of Pinterest or Facebook. All these individuals I know, they send them to me. So the first thing I want to talk about is sort of what is changing. And there's a couple of things that is changing with this generation. The first thing is modeling preferences. We're going to see different types of modeling preferences. And with modeling preferences changing, we're going to see different layout design. We're also seeing new technology being implemented in different ways, sort of like 3D pen and green screen, which we'll talk about. And then lastly, it's that social media piece we'll talk a little bit about the end. But I really want to dive into modeling preferences. Like I said a couple slides ago, this generation has one really key trait, and that is instant gratification, that instantaneous part where they want things in seconds, and also that efficiency part of being the student age. And so you're going to see more pre-built kits compared to hardcore weather scratch buildings. You're going to see more unweathered things compared to kit bashing and really hardcore weathering things. You're also going to see more easy track and flex track compared to hand lane track. So the point is, a lot of those are very they're not time consuming. They're very instant gratification. We're also going to see more woodland scenics usage. Woodland scenics, I think everybody knows them. You can make a scene within seconds, right? You can put their magic turf on and spray with their magic spray, and you have a scene within 5 seconds. And that's something my generation values. And so you see a lot of woodland scenics on younger people's layouts. So for example, I'm a visual learner. I love showing examples, but this is what I mean by pre-built building, or just something like Plasticville that takes like less than 5 minutes to build. And this is an example that you're going to see. And this is just another example I have right here, just the easy track right here and the light woodland scenics just around it. So the next thing I want to talk about with modeling preferences is rail fanning and modern style modeling. During the pandemic, rail fanning really increased with younger individuals because guess what? That's really the only social distancing thing you can do without having your parents yell at you for those younger individuals. So a lot of younger individuals went out and rail fanned because if they got their license for the first time, that's really the only place you can go and take pictures of. And so rail fanning increased during the pandemic. And what also increased is modern style modeling, because since they're going out and rail fanning, they're seeing what they're modeling what's around you. They're taking pictures of an actual trains and incorporating that into their layout. And so since they're so focused on rail fanning and they're focused on the actual train, and they're less worried about other details because they're rail fanning so much. So for example, this is my friend's layout in Ohio. This is his layout right here. And you can see he's really focused on the actual train, right? He's less worried about those other details that we see in NMRA and MMR style layouts, right? So if you see my red cursor right here, for example, he doesn't have a lot of stuff going on right here. He has a little bit of woodland scenics, but really that's it. And he maybe has a couple cars there, but that's very instantaneous. He could set that scene up in under 5 minutes, right? And if you look over here, he's very focused on modern style engines and collecting engines because he's actively rail fanning and he's collecting the engines that he rail fans. So modeling what's around you. So this is just an example of what you would see. And if we come over to this side of his layout, you can see the pre-assembled buildings, the pre-built kits right here with the warehouse. And you also see the factory right here. And another thing we can point out is that he doesn't have a lot of detail, again, in between the tracks, right, that we see on MMR styles layout. You just have a lot of flex track that's plopped down, that's very easily settled, right? It's not very time consuming. And another thing, he's focused on the actual train, right? He has a lot of engines right here. I think he has a lot more engines than detail. And you can see some of these engines right here. And then this is my layout when I was in 6th grade in Minnesota. As you can see, I have the pre-assembled building right here and the not code 100, the easy track right here. And I also have a modern BNSF engine right here. And I want to take a time to explain this. When I was in Minnesota, I used to bike a lot, right? I biked about 30 miles each day before soccer practice. And what they do in Minnesota is that they take up all the old train tracks and put it in a bike trail. And so eventually the bike trail goes to an active yard. And so I would bike around the BNSF yard and I would always see these engines. So I went out and collected what I see. I went and bought an engine that I saw every single day. And so that's something we're going to see a lot more of. And another thing, I like to use the analogy of baseball cards, right? If you go to a baseball game and you see your favorite player, you're more likely going to go collect his baseball card. And my point is that is exactly what we're seeing with rail fanning, how rail fanning is transitioning into model railroading. And then this is my friend in Milwaukee. As you can see here, he has that BNSF engine because he is modeling what he sees. He's modeling his surroundings. Another thing I want to mention about that is that he actually has a bike trail right here because in the situation in Milwaukee is actually the same thing in Minnesota, right? They tear up the old train tracks and put bike trails there. So he actually has a bike trail that he's building right here. And I want to continue on and talk about modeling what's around you, right? They're very interested in that modern style modeling because they're seeing everything. And another thing we're going to talk about is modeling these average details that we wouldn't necessarily think about when it comes to model railroading, right? One example is sports fields and soccer fields. You wouldn't really see that if we're modeling B&O or the Colorado Narrow Gauge way back then, 100 years ago. And so you're going to see more average details on younger individuals' layouts that are more modern, like a soccer field. And soccer was really big to me, and that sort of goes hand in hand with trains because I used to go out of town in tournaments almost every single weekend, and I was into Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee again, and I would always go pick up a new train or just something like that at a local hobby store in those cities. And so I put a soccer field on my layout because it's something that I see every day, and I model what's around. Sort of what we talked about, the bike trail. Another guy in Ohio I know, he actually put his own club on there, and he actually has a model train layout for his model train layout, which I think is kind of interesting that you don't really see every day. And this is my layout when I was 16. I moved to Dallas, Texas. As you can see here, again, I have the soccer field. I also have the porta potty right here, another average detail we don't necessarily see, and also the bleachers. And fun fact that this layout actually doesn't exist anymore because over COVID, I fostered dogs, and I had this one big dog named Clifford. He was a big red dog, and he got loose from the downstairs, came upstairs, opened the train room door by himself, and jumped up on the train layout, and he had an absolute ball destroying it. But I was home over winter break, and so I got to redo my layout. So I've been having a ball doing this. So this doesn't exist anymore. But this is a new photo, and this is the new layout I'm working on. I've been scratch building recently. And one thing is if you don't know anything about Frisco, is that it's on the edge of the suburbs. So if you drive 5-10 minutes away, you're probably going to hit ranches and farm field. And so if I drive somewhere, I'm going to see literally longhorn everywhere. And so I put a ranch or a sort of a small farm here because I'm modeling what I see. It's modeling my surroundings. And this is just another example I have of sort of a farmhouse and a red barn here. And then I also have a lot of small towns around me, Salina, Denison, a lot of the smaller towns. I think a lot of people have heard about Denison. But this is just another example I've been doing, modeling what's around me, adding in everyday details. Clearly it's not finished, but I have the mail things in the trash cans right here. So I know that section was pretty short, but I want to talk about layout size because modeling preferences goes hand in hand with layout size. And with this generation, we have to keep one thing in mind, is that instant gratification trait, right? That instantaneousness and efficiency. And so we're going to see more small rectangular 4x8 layouts. And I know that's a trait that we see with a lot of beginners. However, what's something that's really interesting is that this generation is continuing to use the 4x8 sheet, which I find very interesting. And so we're going to see 4x8. The reason why is because plywood comes in 4x8 sheets, and that's really easy to just start making your layout. You don't have to, cut a whole bunch of wood pieces or do anything like that. You can just start, and that's sort of that instantaneous trait we're seeing with this generation. I'm going to talk a little bit about modular at the end, but one thing I'm seeing a lot of is HO scale. And I've seen literally the majority, like maybe 96, 99% of people my age that I know about model an HO scale. And the reason why we're seeing so many people model an HO scale is because pre-COVID, if you went to a train show, there's a lot of cheap HO scale things you can get. And that sort of works with the student age. And another thing is that there's other companies like Hot Wheels and Hasbro that sort of make accessories that are similar to HO scale, that would fit in HO scale. They're not exact, but it doesn't matter when you're this age and you're the student age and you're worried about efficiency. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of HO scale, because there's other accessories that other companies make. So this is my layout when I was in Minneapolis. I actually lived in Chanhassen. That's where Prince is from, by the way. I drove by his house every day to school. But this is a 4x8 layout I had. I have the Easy Track right here. I keep mixing up Easy Track and Flex Track. Easy Track right here. I have the pre-assembled buildings right here and back here. And this is sort of a stereotypical layout you're going to see. So the next thing I want to talk about is materials, right? And there's a couple materials I want to go over. And sort of like layout size, there's a giant range of options you can do, right? If we've seen sort of like Andrew Keeney's layout, that's like huge. And then there's some layouts that are super small and fit in a suitcase. And that's sort of my point with materials. There's a wide range. However, we need to remember a couple of things that this generation likes, and it is instant gratification and instantaneous and efficiency traits. And so we're going to see that play into materials. So we're going to see more pink foam. Most of the people that I know in my age use pink foam, or what we call insulation foam, right? That 4x8 sheet of foam. And the reason why we see a lot of that 4x8 sheet pieces of foam, it's really easy to plop down on your 4x8 piece of plywood and start modeling. The next thing we're going to see is more woodland scenics. And I talked a little bit about that at the beginning, right? That instantaneous trait. And another thing is because woodland scenics started marketing to millennials and Gen Z and part of Gen X 6-7 years ago before anybody else does. And now, since they play the long-term game of social media, now they actually have a really big fan base of younger modelers that really only want to use woodland scenics because they took the time to just market a little bit. And so a lot of my generation uses very generic materials from woodland scenics. Another thing you're going to see is more basic paint compared to designer paint, sort of my metaphor that I was going for there, with the more just out of the box kits compared to scratch building, sort of the same metaphor. And then another thing is we're going to see less unique materials, more materials that require less research and really easy and not a big learning curve. So for example, this is the bike trail guy from Milwaukee. This is actually, it's not a 4x8 layout, it's a 4x11, but this is sort of the stereotypical layout you're going to see. The first thing, if we look at, he has the pink insulation foam right here. He also has the flex track and he has the modern style engines right here. So this is a stereotypical layout you're going to see. And another thing, he's actually building the bike track right here, bike trail right here, which I find really interesting. And then over here, this is the other part of his layout. He has the flex track. And I also want to point out on the back, he has the Woodland Scenics risers, sort of using less unique materials, getting things straight from the manufacturer instead of making them. That's another example of what my generation likes. But you can see the Woodland Scenics risers right here. And then this is my example from when I was 16 and I moved to Dallas, Texas again. As you can see, I have the blue and pink insulation foam. So the next thing I want to talk about is past trending technologies. There's a couple that comes to my mind that are really popular right now with sort of the Gordian speed age, that parent age right now. And these are the 4 things that I'm finding that they're really liking. 3D printing, DCC, phones for controllers, and Arduinos. And we're going to talk about all of these. However, this is not Jeff Bunza or whatever, I think he's in here, is not going to like this. But I haven't seen anybody in my age even use Arduinos before. And so I can't really talk about it because no one in my layout, no one in my network has done Arduinos and uses it for their layouts. And I'm not sure if that is a very small niche or it comes with maturity. But we're going to talk about the other 3 today. And the first thing I want to talk about is DCC. And like millennials and like sort of that Gen X, that older parent age, my generation really likes DCC because guess what? They're focused on the actual train. I know I said that a lot during that first section. And also DCC is your own personal train phone. And so that's sort of a win-win because we really like our phones. And that leads me on to phones for controllers. And we see a lot of these companies creating apps that you can remote control your train on from your app on your phone. And I think that might, and this is just me, but I think that might really replace DCC, especially with the younger generations, because guess what? Like I said, again, we love our phones. If you have a grandkid or kid and they lose their phone, it's a life and death situation and they're panicking until they get it back. And so phones are something that my generation really likes. So I see the hobby moving more towards technology and phones, sort of like this. The next thing I want to talk about is 3D printing. And some of you may be shocked why I said it's out right now. And what I'm referring to, it is out for the people who are my age that are already in the hobby. I'm not talking about other people my age because a lot of my generation loves 3D printing, but I'm talking about the people in the hobby that are in my age right now at the present moment. It could change, but I'm just talking about the present moment. And the reason why it's not really popular right now is, first of all, it's the student age, right? They want that instantaneous efficiency, right? And so it's a lot of prep. There's a lot of types and it's very expensive. And that doesn't really fit well with this age group right now. And another thing I want to point out is that it's overused in everything, meaning that a couple of years ago, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, right? 3D printing went down in price. Now the average individual can get a 3D printer. And one group that took advantage of that is schools. However, schools turn that into a chore and it's not a lot of fun for younger individuals right now. And so a lot of people aren't interested in doing 3D printing at the moment. And so my theory and what I'm thinking is, I'm wondering if it's going to play into the future during the for hobbies, because right now it's turning into short with schools. I wonder if schools will affect how they view 3D printing if it's not work related. Well, that's just a thought I have. But the next thing I want to talk about is sort of what is trending now with this technology that we really don't know about. And the first one is a 3D pen. The 3D pen I like to call is sort of an instantaneous version of a 3D printer. What it does, it's basically like a glue gun, but instead of shooting out glue, it shoots out plastic. And it warms up plastic to make really cool and interesting things or standalone structures. And because this is instantaneous, because this is a lot cheaper, my generation really likes this. So this is an example. I gave this to Youth in Model Railroading National Meet and also the British region, a clinic on this. This is part of a clinic that I did, just showing an example of sort of what a 3D pen does. And that's ABS plastic right there. And that's about as width as an HO scale railing for your car. So this stuff is super tiny, but that's sort of the width of it. And then this is an example that I made on here, sort of with the window right here, that how small it is. I made it for sort of that cross section right there. And also the railing right here. And another thing, what I talked about with YMR, the Youth in Model Railroading, because a lot of them actually have, a lot of the kids on there on that Zoom meeting have this 3D pen, but just don't know how to use it. And so, oops, I went backwards. And so what you can do is that since this breaks all the time, you can really repair it. And you can make something very instantaneously, right? You don't have to go to a manufacturer or anything like that. You can just make one right there. And this really drew a lot of attention to younger individuals because of that instantaneous, instant gratification agenda. The next thing I want to talk about is logo and sign design. Older generations use this a lot. However, my generation is using it a lot more because we grew up with technology. And this is one of these things, this logo, sign design, photo editing software. They're like the 3D printer. They went down in price. Now the average individual can use it. And so we're seeing a lot more of this with younger generations because they're more tech friendly compared to older ones. And so one example is my friend made this. He's an NMRA member out in Florida. He's about 20 years old, a couple years older than me. And he made these next gen railroaders for free in about 5 minutes. And so you can make professional logos in a matter of minutes. And so you're going to see more of these logo design and custom design things on younger individuals' layouts because they know how to use the technology and they're familiar with it because they use it through school and through other hobbies. Like if we go on and see TikTok, if you heard of that, it's just a whole bunch of people photo editing and making videos of themselves. This is sort of the same concept that we're seeing with these logo and sign design stuff, sort of the same concept. And this is an example that I made for my layout. I think I showed this at the beginning. I do wear cowboy boots and a belt buckle, so that's sort of who I am. So this had to go in my layout. And then this was another example I had. I worked a little bit with Toy Train Operating Society. I helped them create a new social media account because they're creating a new Texas division. I'm not doing it anymore. I don't have time. This was sort of a concept I made as a logo, but I'm going to use it on my layout now. The next thing I want to talk about is scratch building because this is NMRA and NMRA is nothing if they do not have scratch building, right? So scratch building is really important for NMRA. So I always like to bring this up. So the first thing is that I said at the beginning that my generation is all about instant gratification and all about rail fanning, right? However, the very small amount, the minority of individuals in my generation, like me, when they scratch build, they use cardstock compared to other things, right? And so a lot of people my age use cardstock.
Start video.
And cardstock is really
Start
good.
video puts me on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. And so the reason why I want to talk about cardstock is because cardstock, like I said, super popular with people my age. But you can incorporate that modern style, that rail fanning, that modern style modeling with cardstock, because you can use Google Earth and you can use that photo editing software that I just talked about to literally photo edit bricks and other material you use on buildings and just glue it down to this cardstock right here. And so you can incorporate that modern style modeling. This is another example. I already showed this photo, but this is an example of that farmhouse I made. Just another example. It's all cardstock. And this is an example I made. This was sort of a test thing. I think this was like my 5th build ever or something crazy like that. I've only done under 20 builds of scratch building ever in my life. So FYI, that's sort of where I'm at right now. But this is just an example I have. This was a test for the 3D pen. Just another example. I try to use the 3D pen as much as possible on here for another presentation. And then this is an example. This is an actual building in Excelsior, Minnesota, a very small lake town that basically had a railroad going through it. Now it's just a trolley. But since it was on a huge lake, there's a lot of old buildings. And so this is actually to scale the building, and the brick is the actual brick from Google Earth, and the sign is actually to scale. So this was an example what I meant about using those photo editing skills and putting it on a scratch building. The next thing I want to talk about is green screen. Green screen, like photo editing software, went down in price, and the average individual can now use it. And so this is an example of my old layout. I called the pre-Clifford era layout, that big red dog who jumped on the layout, if you don't recall. And what this is my green screen right here. It's not actually a green screen. It is a Party City tablecloth for 99 cents. And the reason why I use that is because one is for 99 cents. I can cut it, I can shape it, I can put the green screen on hard to reach places in my layout, and I can photo edit it. And also, this green is not one that Woodland Scenics makes. And so this is really good if you model something that has a lot of green in it. This is just an example I have of a photo of me just creating a photo right here. I need to edit it. I took this a long time ago. That's another example right here. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is the last part of technology, is called the drone. And I actually did like a mini clinic, like a 15-minute clinic with John Lowrance's division, right? And one guy said, "Why don't you add the drone in there?" He gave me all these reasons why, and I actually just forgot about adding the drone in here, so I added it in here. And the one thing is that my generation actually really likes this, because guess what? You can use a different angle. You can use the drone to take different pictures or different angles of your train when you're rail fanning. And I don't have any of those drone photos because no one really wants to send them to me. But a lot of people my age use this a lot. And another thing for older generations is that if you go structure fanning, you can fly the drone and get a different angle of the building you want to model. And so the drone is something that's really interesting because you can use this for basically any generation, and you can use this for any type of model wherever you want to. If you're doing that modern style modeling, or if you're doing that NMRA style of modeling, you can use the drone. It's a multi-purpose, multi-generational tool. The next thing I want to talk about is rail fanning. I talked a little bit about that at the beginning, and I said my generation is so interested in rail fanning, but why are they? And there's a couple reasons. The first thing, because of social media, it is day to day. You can interact with people day to day on social media. So you're constantly engaged in model railroading and rail fanning. The second thing, it's easy to hop on your phone and communicate day to day. And lastly, it was a fantastic social distancing option, right? When we had COVID, you have these younger individuals. My target range, which I'm talking about, is 14 to 25. When you have a lot of those younger individuals who want to get out of the house, who are teenagers, they can ride their bike, or if they just got their license, they can go drive somewhere and take a picture of trains. And so rail fanning got a lot popular with this generation. And yes, all these rail fanning photos are sent to me by people my age. This is a guy in Milwaukee again. But a lot of them sent me rail fanning photos and didn't send me model railroading photos, which I'm really not happy about. And we're going to have a chat after this. But they gave me examples of what they're rail fanning. So this is another guy from Cleveland, Ohio. He models a couple things. And then this is a guy from Oklahoma and the Texas border. He's right in the middle of it. So it's about 50-minute drive for me to meet up with them. We're going to talk about why that Texas-Oklahoma border is important in a couple slides from now. And this is the guy who created the next gen railroads with me. It's sort of our blog. We did a little bit of virtual groups, but everybody, hey, right now it's finals week. I just took a county final a couple hours ago before I hopped on here. So we're not doing virtual meets right now because it's finals and no one really wants to. So the last what do you call it? The last section I want to talk about is what we're seeing now with clubs and virtual groups. Now I have a part 2 on this talking about post-COVID recruiting, retaining, and a whole bunch of other things. I go into this a lot. However, just for this sort of like part 1 or this just next generation thing, I like to just give a little bit of an overview of what we're seeing. The first thing is, especially pre-COVID and now post-COVID, is we're seeing a lot more virtual groups. Those 100% virtual groups that pop up that are Zoom meetings, right? Those Jim Kello groups, the OPSIG, the Colorado Narrow Gauge group we talked about earlier. We're seeing those virtual groups. And the really thing that's interesting is that you can get more options with those virtual groups. So we may see a huge transition from TCA and NMRA, those big national organizations. We may see a huge transition from people out of those organizations to these virtual groups because you can interact with people. And that's something we are seeing with the student age right now. I do not have an example of them. Actually, one of them is actually Focus, organized exactly like NMRA. And the reason how they're retaining members is through a hybrid structure, meaning they're giving people as many options as virtual, but they're also offering in-person things. So they're doing once a week Zoom meetings and once a month in-person meetings. And we're seeing these divisions at every single school with this focus group with 200 to 1,000 people per division doing this hybrid. And so this is something that we're going to see in model railroading. We're going to talk about this on the next slide. We're also seeing more day-to-day activity on social media. And since we're seeing that, especially with the pandemic, that's telling me that the hobby may go more virtual in the future. We're also seeing that this generation really likes train clubs, meaning that they like more permanent and modular layout clubs. The reason why is it goes back to that baseball card analogy, right? They have all these engines. They have small layouts because they don't have that big of a budget, but they do have a budget to go and join a permanent model railroad club. And so we're seeing them join permanent model railroad clubs over national organizations like Toy Train Operating Society, TCA, Train Collectors Association, and NMRA, because they have that ability to have options and also run their actual train. And I think that's incredibly interesting. One thing I want to talk about is virtual groups. We all know what virtual groups is, but there are actually some Gen Z virtual groups out there. And the first one is rail fanning network groups. I created one for the teens of Texas. I'm not in it anymore because my phone kept lighting up during tests and I had to leave it because they kept talking about trains. But what it is, it's basically a whole bunch of teens in Texas, about 40 to 60 of them who are very interested in trains, and they actively tell everybody where a train is to go rail fan. For example, that guy I was talking about, the Texas-Oklahoma border, he says, hey, there's a BNSF engine coming down. Dallas guys, take a picture when it comes by your house. And the Dallas guys do that, and then they go tell the San Antonio and Houston individuals to go do that. And so when you have 40 to 60 trains per day all over Texas, it makes rail fanning a lot more efficient. I use that efficient word again. A lot more efficient. And so you really only have to stand outside for 30 minutes to an hour compared to 6 hours. And so we're seeing these rail fanning groups increase, especially after COVID. And I find that really interesting. The next thing is Next Gen Railroaders. Like I said, it was a blog I made with a whole bunch of other college kids who also are very active in these organizations like I am speaking to y'all. And I don't think we're doing virtual groups anymore, but we do, but it's just a blog and a Facebook group to keep up with other college kids. The next thing I want to talk about is a hybrid group that we're seeing. It's called Youth in Model Railroading, or YMR. It is a national organization for 8 to 18-year-olds. And right now they're having national Zoom meetings during COVID. But one thing is that they actually have local divisions that are now going in person again. I talked to the president about this. And they're very honestly considering, and I think they've already made a decision, that they are going to continue those national Zoom meets, meaning that they're probably going to be the first official hybrid national organization in model railroading. And hybrid option, if you remember, talked about this a little bit, is that hybrid groups allow you to give basically give you a ton more options to be involved. You can hop on Zoom meetings, or you can go in person whenever you want to. And so we may see this hybrid format adapt with these national organizations. The next thing I want to talk about, and like I said, I go into this in different presentation, but I do want to give a little bit overview of social media, because this is the biggest question I get a lot. Is the hobby dying? And from my perspective, it's not, because what happened over COVID was that so many people who were new jumped up on social media and now involved. And now there's millions of new model railroaders out there. The issue is that there aren't a lot of clubs and organizations, TCA, NMRA, all those big ones, do not market a lot on social media. And so those new people don't know that these organizations exist. And so what we're seeing with what I'm seeing when I'm talking to other people is that the clubs are actually dying, because a lot of the newer individuals, sort of like me, don't know that these clubs exist. And so if they market more or on social media more, we may see younger individuals absolutely want to join those clubs. And so I just want to give that overview a little bit. But the last thing I want to talk about is modular clubs. And there's a couple of things that this is really good for my generation. The first thing is that instant gratification part, right? And modular clubs are really easy to do, right? If you have a module, you mess up, it takes an hour to redo and clean up. And that to me is really instantaneous compared to train layout and building it for months or years. It's also not time consuming, and it's something that's easy to do and unique, and you don't have to be all in the hobby. You can be on and off with a modular club, right? And that's the good thing about modular club. It's very easy to store, meaning it doesn't take up a lot of space, doesn't take up a lot of budget. And since this is the student age, that really fits with them. It's also a great way to be part of community, and it's a great way to be part of a train show. I joined actually the NMRA when I was 16. I just showed up at a meeting one day by myself. And the first train show, I got to decide to go on that other side of the booth, that vendor side. And when you're 16 and you're doing the membership and recruiting people, or even just on the vendor side, it's really cool. And a lot of older individuals take it for granted, but when you're younger, that's really cool to be on that other side of the booth, that other side of the train show, being that vendor area. And so a lot of younger individuals really like this. But my clinic is really short today because I usually get some questions on a lot of this stuff. But if you're going to take anything away, is modeling preferences. We talked a lot about that modern style modeling and that instant gratification. Another thing, if you want to take away, is technology, that social media part, and also rail fanning. But that is it for my presentation. I thank everybody for putting up with me. Does anyone have any questions?
Sure, I'll start. So thank you very much, James. This was absolutely fascinating. First, don't let all the grumpy old men in this hobby get you down. Keep it. There's too many of them. Keep up your attitude. I really appreciate that. It sounds very much like it was. I hate to say this. It sounds very much like it was in my day. We would use the cardstock models, these small layouts, etc. I'm so glad to see it still going. A couple of questions though. You said you like to collect engines, and engines are the most expensive thing you can buy. So why is it that you want to collect engines rather than something else?
Well, engines are very expensive, but if you go to a train show, you can get an older one for like $5, right? And also, it's because of HO scale. That's a lot of people are in HO scale because there's so many of them. And another thing is that rail fanning aspect, that focusing on the actual train, modeling what you see, and it's collecting like that baseball or card analogy. You collect your favorite baseball player's card. And so they're doing that same thing, both rail fanning and model railroading. That
makes more sense. Thanks much. The other question I had was you almost, maybe I took you wrong, but it really sounded like you drew a distinction. You could either join a club or the NMRA. Why not both?
Okay. I sometimes, yeah, I see that. I didn't really I'm in multiple clubs. I'm in NMRA and both TTOS. But what I meant by that is, yeah, you can join both. I know people who are in both who are my age, but if you have to pick one, because remember this is the student age that has that budget, which one are you going to pick? Are you going to pick the one that has the layout and has those options to do, you can go in every day or every month, or are you going to pick the national group that you just have a once a month in-person meeting? And so that's what I meant by that. They're going to pick the one that has more options.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions out there? Okay. Well, James, thank you very much. And we'll go straight over to John Lowrance, who is MMR number 150.
Have you got it?
Yes,
Yep.
and it's in presentation mode.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Now let me find my control screen, wherever it went. Okay. It's amazing how this stuff works when you're doing the test, and then okay, we should be ready to go, and you should be seeing the full screen with none of the other stuff on it. Is that correct?
We do.
Okay. Well, let me start then with little information. I'm going to start with kind of some things about the club and kind of the management. If you're in a club, that'll be interesting to you. And then we'll conclude with an actual layout tour going all around the layout. But we're the San Antonio and Northern Model Railroad, which is basically the club is the San Antonio Model Railroad Association. And we are a 501(c) organization. We own our own building and we own our land, and we now own the railroad. So we're off to it. Our building, our total layout size inside the building is 40 by 80. And the building itself is 50 by 100 and completely owned by the club. Our mission with the essentially established by the 501(c) status is to demonstrate how Texas railroads provided door-to-door service prior to the interstate highway. So that sets our time at around 1959 was the first interstate highway down here. So it kind of sets us in time. And the railroad that we model, we have it averages around 100 members at any given time. Sometimes it'll go up to 122, I think is as high as we've ever done. So we had modelers that modeled everything. If we took a vote, that probably would have been something like the New York Central or Pennsylvania Railroad instead of a Texas railroad. But because of our mission, we had to pick a Texas railroad, and we found out it could be fictitious. So rather than try to model any particular railroad, we're looking primarily at the MKTSP, the MP, and the ATNSF. But our particular railroad is called the San Antonio and Northern. Another interesting thing about why we picked that, San Antonio is on the edge. Between San Antonio and Fort Worth is the last place the ocean was before it receded to its current levels. So it's a series of cliffs, and beyond that, north of that is what we call the hill country. And the terrain there would have necessitated building a lot of bridges and scenic kind of things that all model railroaders want. So of course we said the real railroads ran around the escarpment on the flatland all the way to Fort Worth. In fact, the Katy and the Mop were like 50 yards apart. So what we did is we said our railroad is going to shortcut right through that hill country because we didn't care about building bridges. We rather enjoyed it. So we we essentially opted for that so we could actually have and utilize the hill country, Texas hill country scenery. Our setting for the railroad is 1950s, technically April 59 for our scenery. Again, our route is between San Antonio and Fort Worth, although the fictitious railroad runs beyond that and goes north, and then also goes, we have a future extension plan to go down to Corpus Christi and to the Gulf there. We spent a lot of time setting standards, and one of the things that we depended on and everybody should have is good old John Armstrong's track planning for realistic operation. It's the Bible, and it has been for years, and probably will continue to, even for James's generation. But we spent a lot of time establishing that. The key standards, we're using code 83 nickel silver rail. We set 30-inch minimum as our minimum radius with transition curves for the main line and the main line siding radius. We have 12-foot passing sidings, and on all of the mainline passing sidings, our minimum turnout is a number 8. Our maximum grade is 1.25%, but we level through those 12-foot passing sidings to prevent rollaway cars and things when you're doing switching operations. Another thing that a lot of people seem to forget, particularly the newcomers, is any place we have an S curve, we have a requirement for a 12-foot or 12-inch straight track to go through that. We spent a lot of time doing stuff like, some standards for scenery, how to build a tree, here's how we'd like you to do it, here are the materials we'd like you to use, and so on. And we did a lot of sketching. Matter of fact, it took us a year to really design the railroad. And we had something like 87 different plans submitted by members for what they wanted the railroad to be. And what we realized immediately when we did that, when we called for plans, is everybody has a different idea of what an operating railroad should be. One of those plans, for example, was 8 tracks side by side, snaking all through this entire building, not one turning. So basically, you put your railroad on a track and it just went zoom around and around. But we also learned from that that's important. There's a lot of people, that's what they want to do. And perhaps this is maybe what James was talking about to some extent. They don't care about prototypical operation. They want to run trains. And these particular guys like to see how many cars they can put on a train. So it's not unusual to see a 100-car train pulled in what we call fun run operations. Anyway, our layout at this point in time is DCC only. We experimented with being able to switch it back and forth, and that was a total disaster because somebody would change it over to DC and or DCC, and 15 engines would take off. It was absolutely terrible. So we ended up we're using CVP's Easy DCC. Which I don't know, if we were starting over again, we probably would go to something else, but it has been a good serviceable thing for us. And Keith Gutierrez, who invented this system, is right there in Dallas. So he has been very supportive and good for us. We also use JMRI and Easy DCC. We don't allow any programming of locomotives out on the layout. All programming must be done back here in the back on a programming track where the JMRI and the computer and all of that stuff is readily available. We established rolling stock standards, and we appointed a car czar. And basically what this guy does is he applies the AAR rules for December of '59. So, for example, any interchange cars have to have AB brakes, no K brakes, that sort of thing. And that torques a lot of people off when they bring their cars in and want to run them, for prototypical operations, and they're rejected. We use KD couplers, the metal ones only. We don't, they've outlawed the McHenrys and some of those plastic ones because we were having so many problems with the knuckles breaking on them. Also, they went to adopted a standard for metal wheels. And all of this pertains to rolling stock that's used in prototypical operations, not what we call fun runs. So as far as operation, we have both prototypical and we have what we call fun run. The prototypical, all approved cars, the members can use their own locomotives, but again, it has to be DCC and run. We average about 12 cars on a train. We found that if you get, the layout will accommodate way more than that, but we found that the amount of paperwork that an operator has to handle to run 18 and 20 car trains slows down the operation so much that it becomes unenjoyable. And it is a model railroad, so we do need to enjoy it and have fun. We use JMRI switch lists, and we have a dispatcher. We'll talk about all those things a little bit as we do the tour. Just lost my spot here. The fun run is an interesting concept. It tends to be, as James pointed out, the younger members, they want to just run the trains. They don't want to run 1950s equipment. They want to run modern equipment. So all of our clearances for tunnels and that sort of thing are adopted to modern equipment as opposed to the older 50s equipment. So we have clearance for the double stack cars and all that kind of stuff through the scenery. The fun run is typically run in one direction. And when you look at the railroad design here in a minute, you'll see that we have a loop. We've got about a 3-foot piece of track that turns this entire railroad into one giant loop-de-loop. And so the fun run guys, because they're running huge trains usually, they tend to run in one direction. They pick a direction for the night and they run in one direction. And they can run anything they want. They bring their own equipment, they load it, they stage it. There's a staging yard in the back for fun runs guys to stage their train when they're ready to take it out on the main line. They can do it. The fun run guys, though, are not allowed to switch, pick up, couple up to, or anything else, any of the prototype ops equipment, because of course you guys already know what that's going to do to the computer tracking of those particular cars and things. The layout design, we landed with this giant building, and we'd had in the previous layout, we'd been thrown out of 2 or 3 properties before because we didn't own them and had to tear down several layouts. So we had some concept for what we wanted. And we established the layout design committee back in 2001. And some of the things they came up with almost immediately was they wanted a visible run was from San Antonio to Fort Worth. Anything beyond that is in staging. This was an unusual one. They said, we want scenery that dwarfs the trains. We don't like the shelf type railroads where you only have maybe 12 or 18 inches of headroom above the stuff. They wanted the scenery to dwarf the layout, which necessitated running trains through an area more than one time to utilize the thing. We could have put 3 layers of one directional track in there, and the John Allen mushroom kind of thing, and it would have taken you 3.5 hours to get around the layout. As it is right now, it takes an hour almost to run at scale speeds around the layout, from one part of the loop to the next. Anyway, they wanted both types of operation. Some of the guys wanted the prototypical operation, but actually the majority of the guys wanted to just go run their trains. So we had to establish both types of operation. The other thing that we were looking for is visitor-friendly panels, because if you come to visit, and this is an invitation to any of you here, if you happen to be coming to San Antonio and you'd like to come and operate or just visit or whatever, please get a hold of us and we'd be happy to have you. But they wanted visitor-friendly panels, and one of our members who's passed away designed these. And it's pretty simple. The way the panels work, we'll look at them in a minute. And they wanted fire protection. And I'll talk some more about that in a few minutes too. The products of this one-year committee were to come up with basically a plan for the main line and the aisles. And the aisles are so critical in railroad design. For us, of course, we had to maintain we had to do the standards for the public with the wheelchair access and the ability to turn at the end of the aisle, turn a wheelchair, and so on. So some of the layouts submitted would have taken you 10 minutes just to walk through the aisles, and you would have been trapped and dead in a fire. So a lot of work went into the aisle plan for this, as well as where the railroad actually goes. Then we proceeded to, in each of the towns, we designed a scenery and industry, a more detailed plan, so that we knew what kind of industries we were going to put in this town. We could evaluate it. The operators could look at it, and they could see whether, where you had places for this type of car or that type of car. So that was all kind of thought that went into that. So once we had this basic design plan, what we're doing here is we did it all on a CAD rail, I think was our product, or our system for doing this. But this drawing right here shows you, in essence, everything that you need to know about the railroad that's kind of interesting. Remember the loop track? This little track, I hope you can see my cursor. This little loop track back in the back turns this entire railroad into a loop. So if I have staging, both staging yards are down below and hidden. At the end of the staging is a loop track, which allows me to run a train in through the loop, reverse, and put it back on the track that it came in on, so it's ready for departure now as a southbound train. If I were running trains, say a full gravel train and a gravel train of empties, I could run the empties south all the time and run the fulls north all the time, and simply run it through the reversing track and put it back in the other track, ready to go back north as a full or south as an empty. The other, basically, coming out of staging, we go into the yard areas, into the towns of Fort Worth or San Antonio, and in each of those towns is an interchange track between the local San Antonio and Northern Yard and the other railroads that might be passing through and being shared on that main line. In between, you run out on the railroad, and basically you've got 1,000 foot of main line from here to over to here, and a bunch of towns. And I won't bore you with all that. We'll go through the towns one by one here in a while. But so you got the 11 towns in here, and then you're back into San Antonio. And in the back of essentially the visual railroad ends at each end of this point. Can you see my cursor? Can anybody? Is that cursor visible, or do I need to be over here with it?
No, we can see it.
I can see it.
Okay.
So when you go back here, you can either go through the loop, or you can go down to the staging yards, or you can go into this fun run yard. And so the fun run yard has access to both ends of the railroad. And then we have a future division back here that we plan to build. The control panels basically are extremely simple. The red line is the main line. It's marked on every panel uniformly. And the rule that we would give a visitor is if you come to a button, push it. And so that makes sure that you've thrown all of the turnouts the proper way for the main line. If you want to go somewhere else, you trace with your finger where you want to go, push the button if you come to it, and it'll throw all of your turnouts. And they're matrixed, so sometimes that button will throw 3 or 4 turnouts at one time. We have a dispatcher's panel, which is built up in the top, and there's a lesson to be learned here. We had a guy who worked for the railroad who knew everything about railroading. Just ask him, he would tell you. And so he said, well, you have to design this railroad, north-south railroads, blah, blah, blah. So, are always laid out in the dispatcher's, thing this way. So we did. But the problem is when you sit up here in this balcony where the dispatcher sits, unfortunately, the San Antonio side is over here, and the Fort Worth side is over here, directly opposite to what you did. So that's a mistake. That's a case of trying to do what the prototype does. If we were in a separate room, it would have been fine. But in another, these folks are guys that played with Garth Brooks that came to visit the railroad. This fella here, Harold Scott, developed our fire protection. And essentially, everything in the railroad, all of the plugs in the room, all of the power supplies for the DCC, the power supplies for the light bulbs in the buildings, everything in that room are controlled by these remote rheostat deals here. And so what this was a what do you call it? A relay. It's a relay device run by a standard doorbell circuit. And as Harold said, he doesn't know of a single fire ever caused by the doorbell circuit. But each of the islands have everything plugged into this circuit, so that by the door is a red light and a green light. And when that red light is on, you're powered, and when it's off, you're unpowered. And the rule is anybody exiting the building that if you're the last one out, you've got to make sure that that's powered. The whole building is powered off before you go. So it's a little unusual, but it's kind of a safety thing that it was very easy to construct. The railroad itself is built pretty much on a standard set by Laurel Joyner in his Great Southern Railroad some years back. He called it stud wall benchwork. We used both metal and wood studs, but basically at the time that we built this, you could buy a good straight 2x4 cheaper than you could buy a 1x4 or even a 1x2. Of course, today that 2x4 is probably $20, but it certainly was cheaper to build this with a very strong structure. And the great thing is we climb on this. You can walk up on it. We could drive a Toyota up there, and it would be strong enough to support us. And we can finish the bottom off with any kind of standard paneling. We've sheetrocked ours. We put the electrical outlets in there and everything. It looks just like the bottom of the wall of your house when we're done with it. So it was strong and cheap, and it was standardized so we could use material, and that was a good thing. Our backdrops are made with stencils, and we use the stencil spray painting, New London Industries spray cloud stencils, which I'm a little partial to since they're mine, since I started the company. But all of the backdrops are painted using those techniques. we developed these scenery plans with the industries and the mountains and the terrain and that sort of thing. And then one of the things that we did to see how this was going to work is we developed these mock-ups. And sometimes in this particular city, the view block from one side of this, from one city to the other city on the other side of the view block is basically mountains. So to test that out, to make sure that they would be high enough and so on, we just mocked it up with paper. The concrete plant that you see here was mocked up in paper, just so that we had something to concept it and see how big this thing had to be so that it would look realistic. Our scenery construction all around is screen wire and plaster hard shell. It's a little old fashioned, but it certainly was cheaper. We figured it would cost us $1 million to do it with Bragdon geodetic foam. So we used plaster, but we did use Bragdon's molds because some of them were mine, but we bought a bunch of those because they are so good and so nice. If you haven't looked at them, they're great, and they work just as well for plaster as they do with his foam. The scenery construction, most of it is Woodland Scenic ground foams. We use some Scenic Express static grass. That came a little later when we finally got one of those static grass. Somebody built one of those static grass machines, and that helped a lot. We've used a natural rock ballast because it's our railroad down here, our state is yellow. It's a just massive limestone. So all of our rock coloring is sort of yellow and this white limestone color. So we went with natural looking rocks. A lot of our trees they're kind of scratch built. They're from local live things that have been, microwaved and died and so on. Also, some of all of the cypress trees were scratch built and so on. But our water, various water on the railroad is mostly a 2-part epoxy, we used in the shallow areas, we used Woodland Scenic's realistic water with the water effects and all of that kind of stuff to get the white caps and, that kind of, the waterfalls and things like that. The next thing we want to do is we'll take you on a little trip around the railroad here. Up in the upper left-hand corner of all the photos is a map that's going to show you the direction we're going, and also usually where you're standing, looking at the photos that I'm going to show you, so you get some idea of it. So if we start, let's say we're going to run a northbound train from San Antonio to Fort Worth. The first thing our train is probably going to be down in staging, which is underneath this central island right here. And so the dispatcher will give us permission to come up, and our train will come up through the tracks and in the back, and it will come out from underneath. It'll come out of a wall here. It's not a tunnel because we don't have many tunnels in Texas. So we run it between 2 buildings. So it just kind of appears from behind some buildings. But so you can see how it comes up from the staging yard, and in the back here, there's the programming track. It turns the corner and goes down past this fun run yard, which we also use as a passenger yard for operations to build passenger trains. And it goes through the wall back here and appears where the scenery is. And it appears back here from behind some buildings. And so at this point, your next stop is going to be an interchange between the San Antonio yard and the main line. And so the main line, the yard guys will have put spotted cars out there, and your switching list may include a drop of some cars for San Antonio that might be coming from Houston or from Los Angeles or Corpus Christi or wherever the other end of that staging represents. So we're going to come out of this yard, and we run along what amounts to an 80-foot wall. So, it's a pretty extensive thing. Mostly backdrop buildings, passing sidings. There's switching in here. Some of the switching is done by the local yard operator, but other switching is actually performed by the mainline train coming through, because we consider that a town, not the yard back there. After you pass through the yard, you're still going north here, and we come through San Antonio. The main line passes through the San Antonio station, which is essentially the Southern Pacific station. You pass through what amounts to, or what is representing, downtown San Antonio. In your next stop is New Braunfels, Texas, which is just north of here. And the main line run here is almost as long as it is to go to the real New Braunfels, because you pass through the station and you loop back on this long wall. And the long wall was an interesting thing. Many of us, it was a big fight, essentially, because a lot of us did not want that wall. We didn't want all those mainline trains running through that wall. But a lot of the members wanted, particularly the fun run guys, they wanted to see their 100-car trains stretch out. And so that wall run allows them to stretch a long train, an 80-foot train out. You come around the corner and you're in what we call New Braunfels, Missouri Pacific. And New Braunfels had both the Katy and the Mop running through it. And they were 50 yards apart for the most part, at the very most, running all the way up through Taylor, Texas. But it runs in there to New Braunfels, and there's switching and things that in work you might have to do in New Braunfels. And this is a fairly accurate representation of the town. Some of you saw that old movie, Secondhand Lions. That's the actual house that one of our members that likes to build buildings discovered that house and went out and took pictures of it and everything else and built it for the railroad. So we had to have it on. So now we're leaving New Braunfels, Missouri Pacific. And interestingly enough, what we're going to do is loop back through and come back into New Braunfels on the Katy side, which is totally unprototypical, but we do it anyway. So we could model both stations and so on. And so once you go through a little bit of countryside here. There's farms and small buildings, and there is again, cattle. We're trying to model all of the prototypical industries that were in Texas. Again, we do that so that we can justify our 501(c)(3) status. So we come around this corner after we exit, and we go across this top bridge back here. And actually, we're going the other way of what I've got the train on here. But we're running down through here, and we're going to go into a tunnel. And then what we're going to do is loop back through that tunnel, and that's how we come back into the Katy from this back side of it, which is kind of funny. Now, inside this tunnel, if you look in there, what we did, since the whole loop is inside the mountain, we put a backdrop in there, and you look through there and it looks like you've got a town. You would be amazed how many people have run from this side of the layout around to the other side trying to see their train come through that tunnel, and it never does. What it does is it just simply loops around and comes back out. So the rule as a visiting operator, the rule is, hey, if your train disappears into a tunnel, stay put, it'll come back to you. And that's kind of how, that's fairly simple for people. But these bridges are probably our #1 photo op. Everybody wants to take their picture in front of the bridges. Now we're running back and on the reverse side, we'd be on this back track back here. Again, can you see the cursor moving? Or do I have to go over here?
There you go.
Yep.
That
Yep.
does it.
Okay, I say I have to do it on this side. Okay, I need to do that. I got to remember to do that. 2 screens really messes you up on this stuff. Anyway, so now we're going through the tunnel, and that we call it Nethery Tunnel because he thought up that business about looking inside that tunnel. But you come out this tunnel, and you're behind the bridge this time, going back once again into the other side of New Braunfels. So we're not even out of New Braunfels yet. Coming through the other side of New Braunfels, we pass the tower, we pass Comel Cottons. Texas, the state of Texas financed Comel Cottons. And the reason they did was because Texas, if it was a nation, it would be #2 in the world in Angora wool production. Now, if you're thinking ahead, you're going, how did that happen? It was because the Spanish brought those European Angora goats up into the hill country, and it was perfect for them. So we produce all this goat. We had the cotton. Texas was huge in cotton, and not one mill for wool or cotton in the entire state. So the state financed that thing, and hoping to develop a whole milling operation in Texas. Never happened. It never took off. They never could get it going, and that's the only textile mill in the whole state of Texas, right up there. So now we're in the thing. We've got a model of the actual Katy station and that existed, and you can see there's a front and a back track here. When we originally designed it, we had a lot of switching in that back track. It's too far from the front. So what we ended up doing is taking the switching out, and what you have is passing sidings only in there, and a station track that runs around. But we don't do any switching back there anymore because it was too difficult to reach. A design mistake. Anyway, when you come out of New Braunfels, Katy, New Braunfels, we're now going to come back and go back again. Once again, there are 3 tracks on this big long back wall. So you've got another 80-foot plus, it's probably 150 feet of actual run between your station stop here and your next station stop. So we're going to run next to Rimrock, and it's going to take you back through the back wall. Interestingly enough, the first time through the wall, you can imagine you're passing through San Antonio. Second time through the wall, you imagine you're passing through Austin. And then the third time through the wall, you imagine you're passing through Waco or one of the other towns along the way. But anyway, there's no switching or turnouts or anything on that back wall. We want it to be maintenance free, and because those guys will run those trains through there, and some of them like to run them 90 miles an hour. Anyway, you're going to come out down here at this end of the railroad, down here, and swing around this corner, and we're in a town we call Rimrock. And it has a station and a cotton mill, and it has cattle resting operation, and a bunch of stuff that represents Texas. And but it's another station stop where you might have work. Notice this track here. The second run through this scene has no sidings or anything on it. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, when we leave, we're going to swing around the end of the end of the island, and basically it's farming, and there's a big gravel operation at the end of that island down here in the river, and there's a gravel dredging that goes on here. And on that, we're on the back track and we run into behind the next town, which is technically we're not in that town, nor do we do any switching in that town. The reason for that is we don't want to have two operating, since we're running through a scene twice, we don't have two places where an operator would be operating simultaneously unless it's in the same town. So we stagger them. So in other words, this track that we're on now doesn't connect to anything in the town that it's passing through. Instead, it swings around and comes back up here to its next town, which is we call Longhorn, which is a gravel and cement quarry town, and it's mostly that kind of operation. Again, we're steeply into the Texas hill country. The backdrops represent the hill country and the scenery and so on. But the concrete plant is a great switching operation, and it really represents Texas. As we round the corner down here and leave, we come to an oil distributor operation that we switch, and we turn around into what amounts to the John Allen's blob. This is our turnaround blob. It happens to be also the center, geographical center of the railroad. And we call it Clark Center after one of our members. But basically you come around and you're on the backside passing through, no switching, no turnouts, nothing that would cause derailments. Just a single track back through here and through a tunnel where we would now we would emerge in this actual city of Clark Center, which is where the railroad interchanges with the Santa Fe Railroad. And this, as we come out of the tunnel and pass into the main line, we also could take a route into the Santa Fe trackage. And there's also an interchange there where we would interchange cars for the prototypical operation sessions. When we're cleared to leave Clark Center, we're now going to come back around and double on the outer track. And we're going to pass the cement plant, but this time we're on the front track and below the other ones so that we don't interfere with the operations going on there. A quick look at the control panel in Clark Center here. When you come out of these, again, if you follow that main line and just push all the buttons, now preferably the operators before you has already put it back to the main line, but it allows you to do that. If I wanted to back into this track, I would pull my train forward and clear the turnout. Then I would take my finger and come back and push these buttons and I'd back my train in, and it would throw everything for my train that way. When I'm ready to leave, I just push the buttons on my way out and it will guide me through it. When I leave Clark Center, the town itself, which is basically the center of the railroad, I'm going to come back around and I'm starting to double back on those same islands that I went through the first time. And so my doubling back process means that the first I'm going to leave a town, I'm going to go through the other side of the island without that any turnouts or any work to be done. I'm just going to go by it. So the most it'll disturb these operators over here is simply that they need to get their arms out of the way and not wreck my train. So I'm going to come around on this inner track now, and it's going to take me to a town called Van Auken. And when I come into Van Auken, I'm going to, let's see, I'm leaving Clark Center. come into Van Auken, and I'm going to switch. There's a lot of switching in Van Auken, and it's a town that is really a popular place to switch cars and things. Here's an overall picture of it. But there's several runaround sidings, short runaround sidings built into this, a station track. So it's a nice, easy place to switch, but the dispatcher in the JMRI a lot of times will give you a lot of work in this town that you have to do. So once we start departing Van Auken, what we're doing is we're coming around past that gravel operation. There's a canning plant there that actually existed. Lots of mills for corn, flour, and things like that on the layout. Gravel, a lot of gravel, just tons of gravel down here in limestone. When I come out of there, I'm now going to take another one of those long runs all the way around to what we call Waco siding. So I'm back on that back wall again and coming around. And that wall isn't one track. It's basically three tracks, almost side by side. So I don't have to worry about dispatching or anything like that. But when I come out, I'm going to pass underneath, and this is a tunnel operation, but I'm going to pass underneath the New Braunfels town thing, and I come out at what we call Waco Junction. And I'm going to basically come out from under a road bridge. We try to avoid tunnels as much as possible, but so you come out from under a pier, from under a road bridge, and this time you're going to cross the high bridge. And this is the high bridge, which that bridge was donated to the club by one of our founding members, Tom Zingerly, who was keys to what? They're probably in my pants. Anyway, that bridge was built probably 60 years ago by Tom Zingerly, and it's made out of balsa wood. But anyway, his widow gave that to us, and we put it in. We had a giant fight over that because our railroad guy who knew everything said there are no bridges like that in Texas. And we said, yeah, there would be if you went right through the hill country, because that's why only one railroad ever went right through the hill country. So anyway, basically when you cross the bridge, you're into now the only part of the railroad that was designed for single pass through. In other words, one track, one direction is all you've got, narrow bench work. But you go through this cut, and when you round the bend down here, you come in past more cattle operation. That's into this town called Brazos. So it's mostly cattle. And you're heading for and nearing Fort Worth at this point. And you're over here. I keep forgetting I got to be on this side. But you're rounding this corner and coming over here after going through the cut. And you're getting ready to go over to Fort Worth, the island that we do Fort Worth. Now, on this run through Brazos, what we've done here is we actually laid a highway right next to the road, because all of us remember as kids driving along by the road, and the railroad track was running over there, and you do your arm out the window so the engineer will blow the horn and that sort of thing. So we're running into here, and the next thing we're going to come to is an area we call Fort Worth Industrial. And Fort Worth Industrial is mostly, it's the kind of industrial area of Fort Worth with lots and lots of grain elevators, cattle, butcher plants, that sort of thing, oil well supplies, the kind of things that you see in Texas, all of these kind of industries that we serve. And when you round the bend, this would be the old T&P terminal in Fort Worth. What we have done, because we're still quite a ways from being able to complete this, is we had a bunch of members that just wanted to build stuff. So they said, okay, we're going to fill this up with temporary scenery. So at some point in time, don't be disappointed if we tear down whatever you built, because we're going to try to make this look like Fort Worth. But right now, it's just all kinds of buildings. So you switch over here in the Fort industrial area, you come around, you switch over here in the Fort Worth industrial area, and you come around the curve. This is the main line. This other track takes you into the San Antonio and Northern Yard. So if you were running a local, you would probably terminate there. If you were running a mainline train, you would stay on this main line. You would probably at this point down here do switching with the interchange from the San Antonio and Northern Yard. And at that point, you're going to go through the wall and disappear into the offstage area, which is where we started. So you're going to come around the corner and you're going to swing through here. And at this point, you have the choice. You can take that little loop track and turn it into a loop-to-loop, or we can go back down to the staging tracks. The control panel for staging is right here. And when I go down there, I select which track I'm going into. I should run through it, turn the train, and come back and stop and stage the train ready to go outbound on that same track. If it's track 3, I pass through 3, turn, come back to 3. And this is kind of how it works. Now for Fun Run, they stage all their trains back here on this Fun Run yard, and they can go out whatever direction they choose to run for the night. But they learned early that bi-directional operation for them is not a good thing. So here's our contact information. If anybody wants to come or visit us, we have a website. It's a SAMRA. But you have to do TX, because when we went for the SAMRA turned out to be some kind of Arabian porn site. And so we went back to, we had to do the TX thing, .org. Feel free to contact me or any of our members should you come to town. We'll be happy to have you. And if you'd like to get a hold of us ahead of time, if you want to do an operating session or something, so we can tell you when those are going to be. That's usually posted also on the website if you just want to check it for planning purposes. So anyway, that's kind of the background on the layout, how we built it, and just kind of a look at it. We've just reopened the railroad again, and operating sessions have begun again. So we were pretty much closed up last year for the COVID, but we're back in business again. So if you get a chance, come visit us, and be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. I'm going to unshare the screen now. Okay, Jeff and James, back to you.
Clicked the wrong thing and was looking at a menu. Wow. You said it takes about an hour to get around that?
It can, from staging, end of staging loop to end of staging loop, yeah.
Wow.
At scale speeds. Now we have our younger guys tend to like a little bit excessive scale speeds, and they'll make it in 25 minutes.
So how many trains on average are running on the layout simultaneously?
Well, you saw the number of wireless throttles, and then all of the yards are tethered. What we'll tend to do is shoot a train from north and a train from the south out of staging. And then usually one out of the center from the Santa Fe exchange there. So we got 3 trains running instantly. At the same time, the yard operators are making the local trains. If those first 2 trains out are passenger trains out of staging, they're immediately followed with some kind of freight train. So you know, within a few minutes, you've got 5 or 6 trains running and a couple being built right away. But as it gets going, it's hard to say how many. Potentially, we could run as many as we have throttles, but with 11 towns, if you put too many trains out there, you start. The problem is you get a slow operator. And we have some guys that are, we had this one guy that liked to run shays, and he was so slow that he would gum up the whole works. And so he, we had to accommodate, if he was coming to an op session, we had to slow things down a little bit. But the operator guys will normally set out enough trains, more trains than they need for a particular evening, just in case. I'd say it's not uncommon to have, when you get going, 8 trains or so out there running at a time. And if it gets too much, the other problem you get is the dispatcher. The problem is, in the real world, he could fire you. In our world, he can't. And so a lot of times people just tend to ignore him. I mean, I've dispatched and found people 3 towns beyond where I gave them permission to go, that sort of thing. It's all run by a telephone. So when they go into a town, they're supposed to pick up the phone and say, "Dispatch, this is 101. I've arrived at New Braunfels. I'm finished with my work here. I need permission to proceed to Rimrock where I have, work." And the dispatcher, will give them permission as they go. But every time they come to a town where there's a control panel, there's a telephone there, and that phone connects to the dispatcher. Interestingly enough, if you're thinking about that kind of stuff for a club, we initially thought radios would be a really great idea, walk around radios. But the problem we had with that is you hear everybody's comments. And so we had a number of guys that were hard of hearing, and they just the radios drove them crazy. If you have hearing aids and that sort of thing, that stuff just becomes intolerable. So we decided to opt on with telephones so that there's only one conversation on the line at a time.
So 2-man crews or 1-man crews?
It depends on how many operators you have. We tend to run 1-man crews, but we could easily expand. And in a lot of cases, that would be good because it would speed up the switching operations. If you have somebody that's handling the paperwork, somebody that's handling the throttle.
So it sounded like you guys are using verbal track warrants, or is there any paperwork involved?
Well, we have the JMRI paperwork, but we have the warrants are coming from the dispatcher, and the dispatcher has a board up there. It's a simple magnetic board, and he just moves your train magnet around the board, but it works very effectively, and he gives you permissions, and if you follow what he says, you're okay. It only gets gummed up when people disobey the rules.
Right.
So
Cornfields.
we have one guy that's noted for that. I mean, he has been suspended 2 or 3 times because he'll be running his train and he'll smack into the rear end of somebody, and he walks away from his train. There's with 120 members, you're going to get some of these guys, and there's nothing you can do about it. Interestingly enough, I mean, I noticed we got more members in our club than you guys have in your division. And the our some years back, the club, which used to be 100% NMRA, opted to not do that. So people don't have to be members of the NMRA to be a member of the club. And so over time, what's happened is we started with a bunch of guys that wanted to build railroads and were very proficient at building and the scenery and that sort of thing. And James might be interested in this too, but almost universally, the thing that attracts people for membership in the railroad is the scenery on the railroad. It's just something about running your trains through realistic looking scenery. And James is right. A lot of the people that are members that come to, particularly the guys that like the fun run and the younger guys, they don't have a big railroad at home. And so it's a place they can actually come and run all of that equipment in one big long train. But the scenery, unbelievably, is the attractor. It's the thing that grabs their attention. And most of our membership comes through shows. We have a train show and then once a year, and then part of that train show is an open house. And people will come over, and people that didn't even know we existed will come through. And our membership, another thing, our membership is really, by most club standards, fairly reasonable. It's $120 a year to be a full member of the club, which for some of the younger students, that's a lot. But as you know, in other parts of the country, sometimes, I know clubs where the membership is $120 a month. So it's a pretty reasonable, affordable thing to do.
Does anybody else have questions?
So John, on your operation nights, prototype operation nights, do you get any kind of, can you run any kind of engine you want?
Anything you like.
It's just the cars.
Prototypical operations, yes, they can run anything they want, and they do. Most of the prototypical guys like to run steam engines and transition equipment. So most of them are actually right. But we do occasionally get the guy that wants to run his new Amtrak, engine, or his whatever's. We occasionally get those guys, and they're allowed to do that. The key thing with the being within period is that the scenery, anything that an IRS agent that walked in and said, we're looking at your status here, anything that would be visible at any time that they might walk in, it's pretty unlikely they would walk in during an actual operating session when one of these guys was running it. But most of the equipment,
Hand him a throttle.
do what?
Hand him a throttle.
We actually did that. We did that with the zoning guys, the code enforcement guys that come, and the fire guys that come and want to see how many people we could have in there and whether you could turn a wheelchair and blah, blah, blah. But we found that handing them a throttle and involving them just absolutely turns them into a friend instead of a potential foe. But that's great advice for anybody that wants to do it.
What's your age distribution?
Well,
Of the club, not you.
in our world of model railroading, Richard, a young guy is 50, an old guy is 80. So when I say young, what we found, this is an interesting thing. We have 2 or 3 members who are in their teens. Well, some of them have grown up with us and they're in their 20s now, but their parents involved them because they were autistic. And something about trains is just magic for autistic kids. I don't, I'm not a doctor. I can't explain why. I don't understand why, but I can see the relationship. And it's an incredible kind of relationship. What we find too is the younger guys that come in, we've got to try and develop a peer group for them. And from an operations standpoint, they tend to like the switching. They don't care so much about running the trains. Then the kids that actually have trains, they want to run the trains like with a fun run. But just a strict visitor, if somebody brings, a couple of kids or a high school class comes and visits and runs with us, they like to actually, do this. I guess it's more like a video game, doing the psychological maneuver of moving the cars around and that sort of thing. But they tend to bore pretty quickly with it. But most of our actual members are the adults who are parents of the kids.
Okay.
Greg, I see your face again. Do you have anything? And you're muted.
No, just saying thanks so much for sharing this. I've been able to travel to some of those locations, and I think you definitely captured the look of a lot of it very, very well. And if I ever make it down there, I definitely want to get in on an operating session.
Well, please do, Greg. It's interesting that, I'm a former Pensy modeler. So, the scenery there is so different from what it was in the hill country, but there are very few model railroaders that are modeling the hill country because there were no railroads in the hill country. Remembering that as recently as the 1920s, Pancho Villa was hanging out there. It was the last stand of a lot of outlaws. So, you were looking at train robbers and things like that. Plus, it's rugged. It's rugged country to put a tracks in. So there was one track where they call Fredericksburg and Northern that ran into the hill country and never actually went through it all the way. And there was another, the SP had a branch out of Austin that ran up to Marble Falls, which they went up there for the pink granite, the only place in the world you can get pink granite. And but neither of those railroads actually went through the entire, from one side of the hill country to the other. The Santa Fe had a route that they intended to use for cattle. And ultimately that cattle, the last actual railhead for that ended up being way far north of the actual land that they had purchased for the rail operation. So what they did instead is they fenced all of that like a right of way running way down, and they would do cattle drives up that land that they had purchased until they got to the actual railhead. But once again, they didn't try to put the rails through that hill country because it is rugged and it would require a lot of bridges and tunnels. And so anyway, but it's totally different, different kind of scenery than almost any place in the country. But thank you, and I hope to see you. Hope you'll come.
Okay, well, I think if we don't call this off, James is going to fall face forward into his keyboard, and I know he's got finals to do. How many more you got?
He's young. Just tell him more Mountain Dew and Monster Energy. He'll be fine.
James is a trooper. He'll be fine.
What's up?
James is a trooper. He'll be fine. He probably has a date to go on at 1 o'clock.
My sleep schedule is like 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. So I'm like halfway through my day right now.
Oh boy.
Are you going to be involved in the Australian convention coming up? You'll probably be up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
No, I'm not doing that. That's stretching it.
Well, unless anybody has anything else, I'm about ready to call this one a meeting over. I don't know, Richard, we tossed Robert's rules out the window right at the beginning. So do I actually have to call for a motion to end the meeting?
The meeting was adjourned almost 2 hours ago.
Oh, good. So I
Oh.
don't.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for entertaining me and putting up with my my verbose presentation here. But I
It's a
hope I've given
wonderful
you-
railroad.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it more than it was. This was in a one of the model magazines recently, if I remember right.
Actually, this is totally unpublished.
I
This
swear
railroad,
I've seen that track plan of the new Brumfells, MKT or MP. I know I've seen that someplace.
we've had some things on the internet, and
Yeah,
I've
that was it.
submitted a number of pictures to the NMRA Facebook page.
One of my other jobs is I work for Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine. We may want to talk offline if you're interested in publishing.
Yeah, we have, we just haven't found the time to do it because we've been so busy building it. And the guys that operate, what's happened, it's kind of like Henny Penny's bread. As we built this thing, it's attracted a different kind of model railroader. The operator guys are they don't really care about building it. They want to eat the bread, but they don't want to bake it. And all they really want to do is run the trains. They don't want to write articles. They don't want to take a lot of pictures. And
Well, our general article style for layouts is an interview style. We've got questions. And if you can take pictures, we've got an article.
we can always take pictures. Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate your time, and that's valuable.
All right,
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Stu, are you still there? Stu?
Unmute yourself, Stu.
Okay, well, you unmuted and then you muted again. Basically, Stu, I need to know if you got the chat message I sent you.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm still getting used to this thing, but I don't have to worry. You need to find out what.
Okay, did you get that chat message I sent you?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Okay, before you joined us, we announced the results of the election.
Right, got that.
Okay, so Greg is now the assistant superintendent.
Yep.
And I
He needs to
understand.
shave though. Superintendents, assistants have to be clean shaven. All right,
You
I
should
kind
go
of
for
figured
secretary,
that.
Greg.
I've served my time. He's got some new blood.
Speaking of serving your time, I understand you should have the paperwork for your volunteer certificates hanging out there somewhere. If you
Okay.
need to be certified, I will, and we'll get that on out. In the meantime, everybody, especially those on Central Time, good night. Thank you for being here.
Good night. Thanks,
Thanks a
everybody.
lot.
All right.
Good night, Jeff, crew.
Good night, Larry.